Hello and welcome to the Preacher Life. Well, it's a nice Sunday afternoon and at church this morning, and I tried to record this video with my regular camera while I was up in my chair, but for some reason my camera was completely dead and needed to be charged, and it ran out of time before I could record a video. So we're back doing this method again, and hopefully the next time the camera will work again. But if you remember, last time we were looking at the beginning of Genesis 8, which covered the end of Noah's flood. So this week, we're of course continuing on from there. And we'll start at Genesis 8, verse 20, and then go through the first 17 verses of Genesis 9. So, as we have been, we have English on the right with the English Standard Version, and on the left we have Spanish. So, let's read, and then I'll add some comments as we go along. So Genesis 8, starting at verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal, and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Now, start at Genesis 9, verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I give you the green plants, now I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and that shall be a covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds. I will remember my covenant that is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember it. I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on all the earth. God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." Alright, so that's where we're going to end our initial reading today, but let's go back and we'll look at some of the verses in a little bit more depth. So if we go back to the top here, actually, I switched to a different version here. Okay, we're back here in Bible Gateway with the New King James Version. So, back here in the first verse, see that Noah built an altar and sacrificed every clean animal. So, if you remember that with the ark, Noah took 2 of every pair of every kind of animal, and he took 7 of some. So the clean animals are like the sheep, the oxen, and that kind of thing. The animals used for sacrifice. And we see here that Noah sacrificed some of them. So some people have theorized, or it's an idea, that Noah took 6 pairs, so 3 pairs or 6 animals, and then a 7th of the clean. And now he sacrificed 1 of each of them, of 1 sheep and 1 oxen and so on. So that would mean there's still 6 animals or 3 pairs to repopulate the earth, which is okay. And then we see God's promise here in verse 22, that while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. So there's a lot of talk now about the climate changing and that we need to radically change our behavior or will destroy everything. Well, as we see here, God has promised that everything is going to continue until He comes again. That planting and harvest, as we see here, every spring and every fall, cold and heat, again, as we have in summer and winter, and the seasons, winter and summer, day and night, that will not cease. So, yes, we need to be good stewards of the earth as God has given us. But you know what? It doesn't matter if we're burning fossil fuels or coal or oil. If it's a cheap and abundant form of energy that allows more people to get electricity and therefore to improve their living conditions, then that is what we need to do, especially in developing countries that have a hard time getting energy even and have less funds. Well, they should not be restricted of using things such as coal and gas that are cheaper to use and produce electricity so that they can improve their living conditions. And we need to be careful of that, especially when we're looking at ways of getting different energy. And remember that God has said that, you know what, everything is going to continue. And that has been His first promise after the flood that we see here in verse 22. So, moving on down to chapter 9 here. God said to his sons, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So, this is the same command that was given to Adam and Eve back in Genesis 1 and 2. And so, therefore, it is good to have children. I know there are some countries and some people that say we are overpopulating the earth and we should not have children. Well, look around here in Iowa and many places in the U.S. alone. There's a lot of room around yet. And, we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. So we should be having children, just as God has commanded, and to give thanks for what God has given us, and not to restrict that, especially through different forms of birth control, say like through abortion. That is a big thing right now in the U.S. And we see here a little bit later as well that God gave command to see how precious all life is. So in chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, we see here that whoever sheds man's blood, then by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. And that's for you, again, be fruitful and multiply. Bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. So verse 6, that is what God thinks of mankind, that we are made in the image of God and we are precious in his sight. So, as the sixth command said, do not murder, well, that's reiterated here even before the command is given, that if someone takes a life and it's premeditated, not something that's a self-defense or defending your country against invaders, but something along the lines of, say, first-degree murder, and, well, the person who murders, then that person's life shall be taken as well, of life for life. And this is given to all mankind, not just to Israel. This was, again, the second promise that God gave after the flood, or one of the first commands again. So, let's scroll down a little bit more, starting at verse 9. And as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. So, we see here again that God promised that he will never again send a worldwide flood. There are people who believe that Noah's flood was just local in nature and it did not cover the entire globe. Well, if it was only local, then God broke his promise many times. Because if he said he would not bring another flood on the earth like Noah's, and Noah's was a local flood, well, we've been having local floods for as long as the earth has been on, or been continuing since the flood. I know that in my lifetime and just my area here in Iowa, I've seen several devastating floods that have caused a lot of damage and been a problem. And we've seen them all throughout the world as well through the news. But also we need to remember the sign that God has given us. So I'll continue here at verse 12. Continue here at verse 13. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. So, right now, in the U.S. especially, we see the rainbow being depicted in a lot of various means as symbols for, say, a way of life and different associated items. But we need to remember that the rainbow is meant to be as a covenant or a reminder, and should be a reminder for us as well. That, yes, the rainbow is a reminder that, one, God will never again flood the entire earth, and the entire globe will not be covered in water. That is the first reminder. But also, it should remind us that God did judge the wickedness of mankind by the flood of Noah. And as we see later in Peter, that the entire world will in the same way be judged again by fire. So, whenever we see the rainbow in any form, we need to remember that it is also a form or reminder of judgment, and that we always need to be prepared to meet God and to give an answer for everything that we have done. So, I'll look up that verse here in a minute. Alright, I'll start here, 2 Peter 3, verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct? What manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of the Lord, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. And I'll end there. But earlier in this chapter, it was talking about just as in the days of Noah, that the flood came. So, these are things to remember and to look at for Noah's flood, that as everything was destroyed by water, and we now see the evidences of it, that we have fossils all over the world, and we have rainbows to remind us of the time. And also a quick note that with the flood, the unique conditions of it are what would have triggered the Ice Age. So with the flood, all of the earth was ripped up and laid down by water, which is why we see layers of, say, different types of sandstone and that kind of thing in large layers all across continents, say all across the U.S., or ones that go from the U.S. to Europe and everywhere. Well, they're all laid down by the flood. And with all that upheaval with the earth, there's a lot of tectonic activity and a volcanoes as well, which would have made the oceans a lot warmer than they are now. And with volcanoes, there's more clouds and therefore a little bit cooler temperatures on land. Well, warm oceans means more evaporation, cooler land means snow. So therefore, those are the conditions that were right to make the Ice Age because of the flood. After things calmed down from the flood, that's why the Ice Age receded. And the change in the climate that we're seeing now is still a result of the Earth coming back to normal or recovering from the flood of Noah's time. So when we think biblically, then we can see the whole world in a different perspective. And that is where we need to make sure our thinking always is at all times. But next week we'll look a little bit more at the Tower of Babel, and then we'll kind of do a synopsis of where we've been so far this year. But thank you for watching The Preacher Life, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.